So did you know, according to a certain nameless party, that this puppy here, it needed a protection order? That's right, must be protected from JD. You see, apparently JD, he cared about that animal. I mean, after all, when all of that Australian mess popped up, dealing with that dog and another one, he actually flew them out on private jets, making sure that they were safe. So of course, something has to happen. Now, at first I thought our something was mere pettiness on display. I mean, after all, it was just a game to take them away. But then I started looking at the long game here. When I started looking at the long game and putting this into context, man, it is a messed up move. And especially considering when you start looking for proof, yeah, you might not find any about JD, but you certainly might find some about someone else. So hey there, to all you wonderful, wonderful folks, by the way, I hope you are doing fabulously. And as we close in the last few days of January 2021, I hope that this new year is indeed treating you well. Now, what I want to do is I want to go over the history of accusation. I want to talk about why that is so messed up, what's being said there and on. But before I get to that, I want to stress the relationship that JD had with these dogs. And you can really see that made manifest in May 2015 when we're talking about Australia. Here is the back end of all of that mess. You have JD set with the two dogs, you have Pistol and Boo, set to board a private jet back to the U.S., as the agriculture minister, Barnaby Joyce, pretty much says they're related and treats him like public enemy number one. Quote, Australia's most wanted dogs are set to fly out of the country in their own private jet. I really want to stress that every time I see it. Agriculture Minister Barnaby Joyce said he was elated that JD's terriers, Boo and Pistol, would soon be departing the country, calling it the best news I've got. Now, I can only imagine how much that cost. I'm sure it cost a tidy sum, especially when people in the know are bringing this up. This is Kate James' words in her deposition. Kate James was a former employee of a certain nameless party, worked with both people, and mentions this would have cost a fortune. Quote, I remember the huge uproar at the time. I was told that JD had sent the dogs back from LA on a private jet, which would have cost a fortune from Australia. Now, despite all of that care and consideration, or if we're really being honest about that, probably because of it, because somebody cares, the accusations, they start flying. And a certain nameless party, they don't only want a protection order for them. You can see that mentioned here. Oh no, they want that protection order extended to their dog. That's right, their protection order, it needs to include the Yorkshire Terrier named Pistol. Now this, of course, it's shot down. The judge, he rejects that idea. He says, that and a year's worth of anger management classes. Well, let's just put it this way. If we were talking about trial by social media, then accusation is substantiation, and you're supposed to believe all hashtags, right? But in a court of law, you're supposed to bring proof too. And as far as that proof goes, a judge said, quote, there was insufficient showing of a need to protect the pet dog. And while we're on this subject, don't you find it fascinating that yes, a certain nameless party may have gotten a protective order, but when you look at that judgment, it doesn't come with anger management classes. So not only do you not need the dog protected, but all of that protective order, yeah, you don't actually have to go out. You don't have to remedy that stuff because wink, wink, nod, nod. We're in California, right? Now, regarding the accusation, because accusation is very important. The fundamentals of that, you go out, you want to trash somebody, you got to have good accusation, right? Well, in 2016, the accusation regarding the animals, it's just like the accusation regarding that certain nameless person. You have a few incidents that have been detailed, but as far as everything goes, no, that stuff, it hasn't been defined yet. I think the perfect word for it is nebulous. We're talking about unclear. We're talking about vague. We're talking about ill-defined. We haven't seen the boundaries yet. Someone hasn't told their tale. But you know what? They're planning on doing so. You can see how this is laying out, too, as neither actor, they're going to receive spousal support. There's going to be a one-time payment. But, there's going to be a lifetime of payment and clout. And even though there's a confidentiality provision calling for neither party to discuss any of this stuff in interviews or in social media, well, you saw saw exactly how that comes up. Now, when you're discussing this too, like I said, we know about the things that will come up with the nameless party. Well, if you want to weaponize that, what do you pull in normally? You pull in children. If you don't have children, what do you pull in? You pull in the next best thing. You pull in the other lives that are associated with this. Again, in this instance, you're talking about the two animals, the animals that end up living with her, by the way. Now, if you looked at all of that developing at the time, it seemed pretty innocuous. You know, it's not going to carry any claim forward. But fast forward to 2019 to 2020, and you can see this develop as part of the narrative. Again, that narrative is meant to say, that guy over there, that's the terrible person. Me, I give to charity. I love our animals. I love our children. And look at what he does. He utilizes them. Now, you have two narratives built out of that too. You have an offensive narrative and a defensive narrative. And the offensive narrative, it looks just like this. Quote, we shared two small dogs at the time, Pistol and Boo. He took Boo and held her out the window of a moving car as some sort of joke or prank, while he himself was howling like a dog. It was so bleeped up. I was scared that he could have dropped her, and I managed to lean across him and get her back in the seat. I will never forget the way that everyone else in the car reacted. No one reacted. There was like a quiet alarm because no one wanted him to drop the dog, but no one reacted so as not to antagonize him, which might make him do something even crazier. That was a really scary situation. Everyone was trying to keep the energy down without confronting him to make sure he didn't drop the dog. Now, as far as those offensive narratives are concerned, that is not the only one. I mean, really, how could it be? You have the mama in the relationship, as it were, developing 14 incidents over time. That all meant as offensive. If you're going to involve the children there, well, you got to develop some other offensive narratives. So we get 3 all told. One of them, I'm not going to show this in front of you, but one of them involves a substance, let's just say, and the ineptitude of daddy in the relationship with letting the child ingest it. Mama there, oh no, is rife with worry because how dare he let that go. And yeah, the other one, it involves the microwave. You can see that in front of you here. Quote, he also kept up a running joke about putting the quote-unquote teacup dog, bred to be as small as possible, in the microwave. How dare he go out and how dare he talk about the children that way? Now, as far as the media is concerned too, they eat that up. I mean, think about the sensationalized headlines. I don't blame them for that either. Sensationalized headlines get people to click on it. I definitely understand that. But what I do blame them for is this. It's a footnote, but yet this is the response to all of that. He's told, oh, you thought this was a huge joke. And he replies, no, ma'am. I don't think hanging a small defenseless dog that weighs 3 pounds out of a window at speed is my idea of fun. He does say, however, the idea of a ludicrously tiny dog, microwave, that's your joke. When we're going to put that thing into a microwave. And he says, as far as a childlike sense of humor, yeah, I have one of those. Now, as far as the offensive is related to the judge, it does and it doesn't work. You have the doesn't work, and it doesn't work directly. As he says here, it's not impossible to conclude one way or the other whether that happens, but then you have that does work. But it is immaterial. It helps build up a narrative. And this narrative overall, despite the fact that you have no substance laid out, it's just allegation after allegation. And in this note here, you basically have conflicting evidence. The judge even says that overall, he finds that it did happen. That's right, it did happen. So it helps build up a narrative. And that offensive, like I said, mama there and the babies. Man, what a monster. What a monster indeed, right? So messed up. Now, like I said, this is a two-pronged strategy, and it took me a little while to grasp this idea that the second part, the defensive, that is much more important to the nameless party than the offensive ever was. Why? Because they need to knock down certain narratives. Some of them, of course, it doesn't matter if they come in, according to the judge, that would be involving Poopgate. Can't prove if it did, can't prove if it didn't, so it gives you a way to knock away at it. But the second part here, the more damaging part, that's what they have to knock away at. And that's Australia 2015. See, Kevin Murphy, he talks about what went on. And you also have Kate James talking about what went on. And they talk about illegal activity. They talk about knowing illegal activity. Basically, a nameless party going in, knowing that something was going to come up, but doing it anyhow. There are receipts provided in this stuff too, and you would think that that would be enough. Now, the nameless party presents that defensive narrative. The defensive narrative is interesting because the defensive narrative, it conflicts a bit with the offensive. It uses it, but it also conflicts with it in the fact that it says he loves the animals, even though, he wants to hang them out windows and put them in microwaves. And you can see this presented here. This is the judge, by the way, talking about it. And he's saying, I buy this hook, line, and sinker. She said JD wanted the dogs to come to Australia in April 2015. He knew they were on the plane. He didn't want them left behind, even though that's what he told us, and that's what he told his staff. It was his staff, by the way, that were responsible for doing the paperwork, even though you have it laid out that it's the responsibility of Kate James. JD, he's the one that filled out entry forms there, so somehow, in some way, it's his fault. She only took the fall for him. Now, you also have an email. It's addressed from her. That's right. From her, asking people to grease vets. Oh, no. She said that it was written at the bequest of JD, so therefore it was. Everything is penned that way, and this, it works. It works fabulously, and it's absolutely insane to watch all of this develop. All of it worked out. Like I said, you have all of these incidents. Basically, it adds to the incidents while also defending from any back blow, anything that would hurt this person's credibility. It's absolutely insane to look at. I mean, after all, if we're talking about dogs and windows, well, here's you a picture of a dog. Here's a picture of a window, and the person that's holding that poor puppy, well, if you look at them, that's not JD. There's more of this picture, too. It basically shows the entire face, but isn't it interesting? This is from that same trip, supposedly showcasing again the terror, the horror, and yet, yeah, you can see that person. They're the ones letting the dog get a little bit of air. They're hanging him out the window. Like I said, it's kind of crazy when you really look at all of this stuff respectively, and you look at how this narrative, it developed in 2016 because it had the intent to be weaponized all the way through until, well, who knows? Who knows when all of this stuff ends? But anyway, let me know what you think about this stuff. As always, appreciate the heck out of you. You make this stuff possible. I can't say that enough. If you want to help out the channel too, many different ways to do that. We have PayPal, Patreon, memberships, merchandise, and of course, a luscious comic book. That closes at the beginning of February. We're closing it down. We're going to print. So yeah, check that stuff out. And like I said, I appreciate the heck out of you being here. You make it work, so thank you.